A woman stood before the men of Alexandria and drew a circle in the sand, not to impress them, to show them how the universe thinks. They came to her scholars, governors, philosophers, and she taught them. In a world that had decided women were ornaments, not architects of thought, she became the last great keeper of the ancient flame. Her name was Hypatia. The Bhagavad Gita opens on a battlefield. Arjuna's bow trembles, and Krishna says something that has echoed for 3,000 years. The soul is neither born, nor does it ever die. Weapons cannot cut it. Fire cannot burn it. This is not a verse about war. It is a verse about what cannot be taken from you. The Stoics heard the same truth from a different direction. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that the one thing no master can own is your capacity to reason, to seek truth, to think clearly. The inner life is sovereign, always. Hypatia lived this completely. Alexandria in the late 4th century was a city on fire, not with torches, but with competing ideas, faiths, and powers. The great library was fading. Old knowledge was being buried under new certainties. In the middle of this, Hypatia taught mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. She edited and preserved texts that might otherwise have vanished entirely. Students traveled great distances to sit with her. She rode through the city openly, discussed ideas publicly, and refused to shrink herself to fit the anxieties of the age. She was not reckless. She was rooted. There is a quality the Gita calls sthita prajna, the one of steady wisdom. Not someone who never feels the storm, but someone whose center does not move when the storm arrives. Hypatia had this quality. She did not perform courage. She simply continued, teaching, thinking, preserving, while the world around her grew louder and more dangerous. And in that quiet continuation, she became something rare, a person whose life was the teaching. The first lesson she offers us is this: truth does not need permission to exist. We spend enormous energy waiting to be chosen, validated, given a seat at the table. Hypatia did not wait. She pulled up a chair in the middle of the street and began. The Stoics call this prohairesis, the choice that is always yours, regardless of circumstance. You cannot control who opens the door. You can control whether you keep knocking. The second lesson is about preservation. Hypatia spent her life protecting knowledge that others were willing to let die. Buddhism speaks of this as dana, the act of giving that costs you something real. She gave her time, her safety, her entire life to the idea that wisdom once lost leaves a wound in the world that takes centuries to heal. What are you preserving? What flame are you carrying forward, even quietly, even alone? Here is the practice. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself one question. What do I know to be true that I have stopped saying out loud? Not a political opinion, not an argument, something deeper, a value you hold, a way of seeing the world that you have quietly folded away because the room felt too loud or the moment felt too risky. Write it down. One sentence. You do not have to share it with anyone yet. But name it. Because the Gita teaches that clarity precedes action. You cannot live from your truth until you can see it clearly. Hypatia drew her circle in the sand. Start there. Draw yours. The ancient world did not end because people stopped believing in things. It ended because people stopped thinking carefully about what they believed. Hypatia was the last great voice asking everyone, regardless of their faith, their politics, their power, to think, to reason, to hold their certainties gently enough to examine them. She was taken from the world violently, but the circle she drew in the sand, it is still there, in every geometry proof, in every student who asks a hard question, in every person who chooses clarity over comfort. The Gita says the soul cannot be burned. Perhaps wisdom is the same. It goes underground. It waits. And then, in someone, somewhere, it rises again. Subscribe to LifeVeda for daily wisdom that transforms your life.